Tonight we are talking about a little bit of a more serious subject. A Lamborghini Huracan wreck at a very high speed, and it did claim a life. So it's a little bit of a sensitive topic here, but I think it's something worth talking about and unpacking because we are car people and we own fast cars, and most of you listening probably do. We enjoy driving. Driving is not necessarily safe or innocent, regardless of the speed that we're traveling. There's 40,000 plus or minus deaths on U.S. highways every year, which is a giant number. So I think this stuff matters, why these accidents happen, what we can learn from them, especially as car guys. Is it just a matter of, slow down? Or is it more than that? I think accident investigations and statistics and what the media says about them is important as well, because you can certainly build a narrative off of something that is not necessarily accurate. In this particular scenario, Christopher Rossi out of Kirtland Hills, Ohio, back in July, was driving a 2023 Lamborghini Huracan STO on Route 322. We may know it locally as Mayfield Road in Geauga County. That is a 2-lane road. The speed limit out there is typically 45 to 55. It's a good road, but it's not an open highway. There are traffic lights, there are intersections, there's schools and businesses and stuff like that. The farther east you get, there's a lot of Amish people in their buggies, so you have to be really heads up and aware of what's out there. And there's unfortunately a lot of fatal accidents with the Amish buggies as well, because they got little tiny flashing lights and an orange triangle on the back of them typically, and, low visibility, and they get hit, and there's definitely no crumple zones there. So, all that to say, this is not an area where you could do a cannonball or something like that. This is not a 3-lane highway, right? There's a time and a place. So anyway, he was traveling at a high rate of speed, according to all reports, had just gone through an intersection, which is important given the speeds. And according to the accident report, somebody had pulled out of their driveway, not pulled out in front of him. They were firmly established in their lane and traveling. And he swerved to go around them because of his speed, and at that point lost control and hit some landscaping in front of a business, went airborne, landed, flipped and landed in a storage building, and the vehicle caught fire. The driver, Chris, was ejected from the vehicle and passed away from his injuries. The passenger was trapped inside the vehicle at the time of the accident. He was transported to the hospital for his injuries, and according to what I found on Facebook, the passenger has made a full recovery and is back to work. But something that was also frustrating for me is when this happened, there was tons of news articles everywhere, right? I mean, it's relevant. We're guilty of the same thing. Something exciting happens. We want to get on what's trending, what people are searching for. We want to be relevant. We want to talk about what's hot at that moment. But there's a fundamental flaw in media outlets, is that they do that, and that's fine, but there's never any follow-up. There's no deeper dive. There's no, okay, what happened? What happened to the passenger? You can't even find his name anywhere online. Not that it's necessarily relevant to anyone that's not involved, but there's no follow-up of, what did the accident investigation say? Why did this really happen? Other than, it was a Lamborghini going too fast. And I feel like all that does is set people against rich people in fast cars or fancy cars. They're all just reckless and endangering all of us. And it's continuing this narrative that we're all just a danger to society, and everybody in a Toyota Camry is just safe and benign, and the world and the roads out there would be a better place if it wasn't for all these people in bright blue Lamborghinis speeding.
Yeah. And, I think we've talked about this a couple of times, and I even pulled up some articles to refresh myself because I remember talking about this when it happened, amongst friends, and there is no follow-up. There is no nothing. There's barely even any information. You have to dig pretty far to get further details, some of which Doug has mentioned on the scenario and what had happened. And there is, like Doug said, there's a fundamental flaw, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't think we're in the position to fix it, but it makes this pretty challenging because I think this is a complex situation that, because it is a bright blue Lamborghini, on the surface may seem simple to people who have some predisposition to feel a certain way.
Sure.
Both positively and negatively. Not positively about the situation, but both maybe from a car enthusiast perspective, thinking like, it couldn't possibly have been the car's fault, or to somebody who is not an enthusiast thinking, oh, that's just, like you said, some rich guy in a fancy car driving too fast.
Yep. So thankfully the passenger was not killed. That's the first thing, is whenever anything like this happens, we don't want quote unquote innocent victims. All lives are important, but when somebody makes a stupid decision and reaps the consequence themselves of that stupid decision, it's a consequence versus an innocent victim who had nothing to do with it other than just being on the road. Getting in a car with a guy, well, that's a different judgment decision, whatever. I don't think that the passenger thought about what might happen. But anyway, let's dig into a few more details. So I was able to pull the accident report from the Ohio State Police, who investigated it, and the photos as well. And there's a few things I noticed from the accident report. One, and this may explain some of the lack of media follow-up. There was no extended or formal investigation other than the crash investigation or the crash report from the scene, because there was no charges filed. And I'm assuming that's because there were no other victims, right? There was property damage, et cetera, but the driver was deceased. So what are they going to charge him with? There's no point. There's nothing to prosecute. So the accident report itself did not come to a number of conclusions that I would have liked to have seen. The accident report stated that there was evidence of alcohol in the driver's system, or there was a suspicion of alcohol. The accident report did not state the speed that they were traveling. It was just undetermined. I've heard rumors from law enforcement that it was between 150 and 180 miles an hour, which, you want to talk about speeding versus I'm going 175, we'll call it, on a 2-lane road with intersections. That is just blindingly fast. It doesn't even compute. I think people hear that number and it's so fast that you can't respond to stuff. On a 2-lane road, it's one thing to do it on a highway. And even then, the times that we got those speeds on a Cannonball was nobody around and wide open visibility. That kind of speed on a 2-lane road is ridiculous. And they had just gone through an intersection, which intersections are crowned, right? Ugh. But the interesting thing to note that I thought was the 3 different eyewitness reports stated one person said over 90 miles an hour, the other person said 120 miles an hour, the other person said 200 miles an hour. So the inconsistency was wild, which I thought was interesting to note because people are terrible at estimating speed. But then there was the question of alcohol, right? And they didn't do a toxicology test because, again, they didn't do a complete investigation. So we have to go off of witness reports. Now, one of his friends was with him at the bar, and Chris had actually passed this friend right before he wrecked. So they had both left, and his friend said in the report that Chris had 4 White Claws in 4 hours at one bar, which seems convenient, that essentially the rule of thumb is 1 drink per hour is within the legal limit.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm not saying that he misremembered or altered the truth or whatever, but I'm just saying that that's convenient, that, his friend was the driver. He didn't likely want to throw him under the bus. The problem is there was another eyewitness report, and there's photos of the blue Lamborghini at different bars. And there's another eyewitness report that placed him at a different bar 2 hours prior. So if he had 4 White Claws in 4 hours at one bar, but he was at a different bar within 2 hours, that already cast shade on the first eyewitness report. I'm already going, okay, this isn't primarily Speed's fault. Do we know that he was drunk? No, we don't. But it's highly likely that he was not fit to drive, and especially not to drive those kinds of speeds, right? There's a difference between maybe being slightly over the limit and driving the speed limit home. I do not advocate it, but let's be honest. There is a difference between that and the mental acuity required to drive 100 plus miles an hour. There's no mental acuity that excuses 150 plus on a 2-lane road, but let's just talk about this honestly. Right?
It just complicates the story. It complicates maybe what actually happened. I think I've driven that road myself, maybe not this particular part of it, but like you've already kind of mentioned, it is a little bit more of a rural area. Visibility is questionable at times, even during the day.
It's a fun road to drive, but I 100%. Don't think I would ever go 100 miles an hour, let alone more than that.
Absolutely.
When I'm ripping it out there, it's like 75, maybe 80 on a straight where I can see stuff, but I'm not. Yeah. Again, there's too many hazards out there. So,
and I think there's a potential for a lack of judgment, whether that's caused by a substance or whatever else that kind of has placed the person in the scenario to do this. I guarantee you I wouldn't even come close.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation all around. It's a bummer that there is not more in-depth investigation into this. We understand why there wasn't. Accidents like this do happen all the time, but I think it's just a matter of judgment on all counts, right? It's really poor judgment to go those kinds of speeds on those roads. It's really poor judgment to go out and have a bunch of drinks and then drive at all, let alone try to show off for your friend. It's really poor judgment to get into a car like that with a friend who's had a couple drinks and or may be prone to show off, right? Like ego plus horsepower do not mix.
No.
Ego plus alcohol plus horsepower really don't mix. So I recognize the irony of talking about this while we're sitting here having a sip of alcohol. But I think there's a very important point, right? Like speed in and of itself is not good or bad. It's contextual. Alcohol in and of itself is not good or bad. There's people every day all across the world who have a drink or two and drive home safely. There's a reason there is a legal limit, right? It's not 0.00, it's 0.08. Right? It's what happens when you take these things to extremes, when you mix them with a situation that you shouldn't.
They're all like different types of risks that when you put enough of them together can lead to varying degrees of bad things.
Yeah.
I think the road is a good consideration there too. This is not, I'm not going to go that speed. That's not, I have the judgment to tell me my skills. I'm not confident in the situation. It's not worth it for me personally, but also not that road.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because it could have been avoided, but it wasn't. So there's the follow-up. I wish there was more to dig into, but I think we can still take some things away from this and hopefully all learn. I don't think most of us are making decisions like this on a regular basis. There's a reason this is kind of a freak accident and a big news story. But I think we all can still learn things from it and make better decisions as a result.
Well, and I think, we talk a lot about a lot of the positives of this hobby and what we're enthusiastic about. And there is a lot of negatives to balance that out at times. And I think we just need to be reminded, whether it's by this horrible story or by other means, that our hobby is potentially very dangerous.
Yeah.
If we are not careful, if we do not make good decisions, if we are not skilled, sometimes the situation is, I don't want to say unavoidable, but there's just many things coming together to kind of make it a truly bad scenario like this one. But just keep that in mind when you're going out for a rip with the boys or whatever, is
Sure.
to be mindful of yourself, your surroundings, the other people with you, whether they're in your car or pedestrians.
Yeah.
Thankfully no pedestrian was the passenger. Passenger, maybe not pedestrian, but
Yeah. Nobody outside the car was harmed, other than maybe needing some mental counseling after seeing what went down. And I'm not saying that facetiously, like that's for real.
It's just never worth it. Gotta be honest.
And like, driving is dangerous, period. All of these factors, whether it's ego, whether it's speed, showing off, alcohol, exacerbate the danger that already exists. I don't think any one of them are actual causes. And of course, I'm always defending the speed thing, right? Those are not necessarily the primary causes, but it always gets blamed. But it ultimately comes down to a lack of judgment. And there was a whole bunch of those factors all together in this one. It's just,
yes.
yeah, 180 miles an hour. It's just nuts.
Yeah, even some of the less intense speed are crazy.
Crazy.
On that road, I would not. Nope.
On a much lighter note, let's go to our wall of shame for the week. And we've modified this a little bit. We've got some interesting love-hate comments directed at us on the internet, mean tweets, if you will. So our mean tweet of the week, I've renamed the Mean Tweak. Ethan, what mean tweak do we have this week?
Well, it's a response to an initial comment which asked, why does Tyler look like he sat too close to the fire? I think that's referring to the redness.
Unfortunately, my genetics somewhere mean that if I am like within 5 feet of an alcohol, my face turns bright red. So I got to run what I brung.
We're still working on the lighting in the studio as well, so that may exacerbate.
We're figuring.
I'm wearing more makeup than Tyler.
Wait, you get a makeup budget? We gotta.
But what was the other one?
Well, yeah, so this was the big one here. Was the response to that from another user? Also, what's with the failed beard experiment on his chin?
Oh man,
He's trying out to be a bass guitar player.
See, you can't blame that on being around alcohol.
Ethan, no, I cannot. This is, again, I got to run what I brung. This is what happens. This is what I can do. You don't want to see it without this here. So, big baby face. I at least look like an adult this way. Nuts for Sticks is a brand celebrating the manual transmission in all its forms. So forget those flappy paddles, because we like shifting ourselves. Check out our fun and funny stick-themed shirts at nutsforsticks.com and save 10% on your order using the discount code SWITCHCAST. That's nutsforsticks.com and use code SWITCHCAST.
Thank you for joining us for Switchcast with Doug Tabbitt and Tyler Sanders, produced by Ethan Huffnagel. Switchcast is an automotive entertainment and opinion show, and nothing we say should be taken very seriously. We do not give tax, investment, legal, emotional, or professional advice, and the only licenses we hold are driver's licenses. The opinions expressed on this show are exclusively held by the people pontificating at that moment and do not reflect the values of our producers or sponsors. Our theme music is provided by Emily and Ivory. You can stream their full album on Spotify or SoundCloud. If you like this show, you can stream it in its entirety on your favorite audio podcast platform. Check out switchcast.live for more info.